Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Loy, your friendly D&T teacher. Welcome back to Term 3 2021. Just to do a quick recap in first semester in our Google site, https://www.tinyurl.com/D&T4E5N. The D&T, the N is the letter N, of course. Now, over there in terms 1 and 2, all right, we have actually covered mainly the design process, the design model, the design communication, graphics communication, as well as technological areas such as structures in term 1 and as well as in term 2 mechanisms. So in term 3, we are going to cover the third technological area, which is on electronics. And of course, in your previous year, all right, for the 4E, when you were in 3E last year, your D&T teacher would have covered this technological area as much as possible. And of course, for the 5N students, last year 4N, similarly, your respective D&T teachers would have covered this technological area. All right, for the 5N, structures is actually your new technological area that you need to answer in the Revised Syllabus 7059 in your coming exams in October, November. So without further delay, let me just introduce to you briefly what you need to prepare and to have, all right? Basically, to have your e-learning as fruitful and as useful. And because we are really moving into the crunch time, so how do you derive the best of your learning out of this e-learning, okay? So of course, first thing to have would be your D&T revision guide, all right? So of course the 2021 version, I can't remember whether it's orange like this or is it the brown version, all right? If brown, from what I understand, was the NA syllabus. But by and large, the notes pages of this book is basically the same. So it is always very good to flip through the notes pages of the revision guide to have a conceived knowledge of what you have, refresh your memory from your learning in segment 3 as well, or segment 4N for the 5N students. And of course, you also need your very good old D&T textbook. Now for your batch, I believe you are the last or the second last batch that the school requires you to purchase the hard copy of the Longman Pearson textbook, which is actually very good, all right? The glossy paper in full color, you know, is very hard to come by. So do not give this away or do not burn the books, please, okay? And if you can, pass it down to someone else who will need it, okay? So this textbook is very useful. Now, if you look at it, it's very thick. Of course, it's supposed to be for a 2-year upper secondary course or 3-year upper secondary course for the NA students. But you find that the contents are very concise and very useful. So my quick suggestion is to actually use the notes pages of your revision guide. All right, look through. If you don't really understand or you need more information, dive right into the textbook. Now, last but not least, all right, during lesson times, your teacher would have helped you accumulate and including the D&T Google site, as I mentioned, your D&T files, all right? So it comprises a lot of your learning notes, hard copies versions as well, your assessments, all right, your end of year examination, your prelim examinations, and so on. So have that handy as well. So just a little bit more about what you will be provided with, all right, especially through this 4E5N D&T learning portal. It will encompass learnings from the SLS lessons, all right, which I will share with you in a bit of detail because you know what you are in for, okay? Now over here, you can see that there's this resistor and color chart, right? This SLS lesson is actually not created by any of our teachers in our school, but by other teachers by a teacher in another school during the COVID-19 situation in 2020. All right. So this teacher colleague's name is actually Mr. Ng Tian Long Jonathan. This is very useful SLS lessons, which I will push it down through to you because you actually learn the fundamentals of using the color code resistor table to identify and determine the resistance value. So you can go through the questions. Okay, all 10 questions are really good. If you can pass all 10, this is really at the tip of the finger already. Now you need to know a little bit about the color bands and how to read the value of the color bands, and of course vice versa, given the value, whether you can come out with the respective color bands as well, then it's very useful for you. Okay, because resistor, as you know, in this case is the fixed value resistor. It limits the amount of current passing through the circuit, and generally what it does is to protect sensitive process components or output devices, all right, in a circuitry. So the next thing down here, which you can see, is the basic electricity and electronics SLS lesson, part 1. There are 6 parts to it, created by, of course, me, of course. And this will be a good trial for you. Even though this was created for the previous batch of 4E students, which is the 2020 batch 4E, and it is actually very useful in the sense that I don't have to recreate a separate SLS lesson just to customize for this current batch 2021, that's U4E and 5N, because this part 1 actually kind of like provides you with a pre-test form, all right, whether you are able to answer some of the SLS questions that is in there for this part 1. So you know for yourself what you already know, and of course if you don't get it right, okay, you need to know what you need to know, all right? So that's where you go back to the revision guide, the textbook, and your files, all right, your D&T files. So coming to the next part, which is also my SLS lesson, the basic electronics and electricity, or basic electricity and electronics, we use the words interchangeably. Part 2 focuses on this input device, all right, or input component we call it, which is the light dependent resistor. So this LDR, you need to know the ins and out of it, all right, how it reacts to the sensitivity of the light in the surrounding area. Of course, for the LDR, basically, what it does is when light shines on the LDR, its resistance value drops, okay? So that means when the light intensity increases, it's an inversely proportional relationship for this device, its resistance drops or reduces, and vice versa, all right? When there's no light in the dark or very dimly lit conditions, its resistance is higher or very high. It behaves like an open switch, which means it doesn't allow a lot of current, in fact no current to pass through it, okay, when it's total darkness, and vice versa. So you need to know about LDR, all right? Now this other thing is the basic electricity and electronics part 3. So over here we look at another process component which is important, okay? Of course I skip quite a lot of input components, right? So we will dive into it later on in the subsequent weeks in term 3 and flow over to term 4. So coming back to this process component of the transistor, right? As you know, there's PNP and there's NPN transistor. It's also important for you to know how it is switched on. When little current flows into the base of this transistor, it allows a larger current to pass through its collector and lets the current flow through the emitter end of the transistor and back to the power supply. So therefore actually allows to activate, trigger, switch on output device there, okay? It could be any output devices. So it's important for you to know the NPN, negative, positive, negative bipolar transistor, and of course its other half is actually the positive, negative, positive transistor, okay? So you need to focus on the SLS lessons that will be pushed down to you on that as well. Now let's look at this thing about the basic electricity and electronics part 4. The focus is also on another process component which we delve into the integrated circuit IC chip world, all right? In this case is your good old 555 timer. So this 555 timer is basically an electronic switch. It turns on and then it goes off, all right? So high, low, 1, 0, on, off. So it provides a kind of a square pulse wave, all right, which is either on or off, high state or low state. So it is very good for timing, all right? So when you have certain circuitries that involve some form of timing, the 555 timer is usually always there. Of course, in its place, you can actually use a combination of between a resistor and a capacitor, all right, to provide that kind of timing, all right, because you know the capacitor basically charges, takes some time to charge and takes some time to discharge. However, for the RC component timing circuit, basically it is not exact immediate high or immediate low, because it takes time for the capacitor to discharge and charge. So therefore it is not a very nice clean curve. It will taper off and go up again. So this is the difference that you probably need to understand. So in the 555 timer, we also, or rather I in the video will actually show you how you can identify very easily by looking at certain pins of the 555 timer and where the resistor and the capacitor are to determine whether it's a monostable operation state or an astable mono operation state. So if you don't understand what is monostable, astable, stay tuned for the SLS lesson. Then the next thing that you need to know is this part 5, all right, the basic electronics and electricity part 5 focuses on yet another process component. This time around is the thyristor. Okay, sometimes you wonder how come a burglar or a thief, you know, stick into a house and then for some form of trigger device, the alarm goes off. And for example, he opens the door, the alarm goes on or goes off, all right, and he closes the door, it's still alarming, all right. That's the whole point, right? Because of this thyristor. Okay, so once it's latched on, the current will just flow, even though you cancel off or you try to mitigate the trigger. Okay, for example, opening and closing the door. So of course, it's a lousy alarm system. If the thief comes in, opens the door, alarm sound, and quickly close the door, that means he actually entered the room already, and then he closes the door, the alarm goes off, all right? It doesn't sound anymore. So that's not a good alarm system, okay? So you need to know how the thyristor work, where this gate is, the circuit symbol, and stuff like that. So you really need to delve into that as well, okay? Now, of course, this part here, which is the 6th and the final installment of my basic electricity and electronics, part 6 lesson, SLS lesson, focuses on basically trying to summarize your learning through a practice in a past year paper. In this case, I believe it's the 2019 Set 3 Express end of year paper. So of course in the SLS, you can always download the PDF and you try it out. The answers are provided and then you can see for yourself how and where you stand, okay? So I doubt that you will be demoralized because you're already in the graduating year and you're attempting a secondary 3 paper, all right? So you should have higher confidence in that aspect. And again, it goes back to your, or rather my basic electronics and electricity part 1, where there's this called pre-test, all right? So this part 6 is actually your post-test, and you see how you fare, all right? Of course, it's a bit unfair in the sense that part 1 and part 6, the tests are not the same, okay? So basically, part 1 basically just to entice you, is the appetizer for you, you know, the basic stuff, you know, certain switches and so on and so forth, to the real test, all right, the past year paper of a Secondary 3 Express standard. Now, of course, not to forget, this another colleague in our Singapore schools, all right, Mr. Tam Yong Kun, he actually created this light sensing circuit SLS lesson as well, as you can see. So that would be pushed to you as well. But take note, because he caters it for his own school's use. So for example, you just need to know a little bit more about some light sensing circuit, the LDR, okay, in my previous part 2 lesson, and then how it's applied to a garden lamp. That's good enough, because there are certain pages in the SLS lesson is not there, because it's a classwork worksheet given to his group of students previously, and also they use a kind of a software simulation for electronics such as Yanka. We don't use that in our school, so you can skip all those, okay? So like I said, if it is my lessons, is basically catered for WRSS students. If it's other teachers for other schools, the SLS lessons are catered for their own respective schools, okay? Now, of course, this last bit here by Mr. Li Yang Sheng, another great teacher in our D&T fraternity, he created this electronics module on switches and sensing circuits again. So this is a booster SLS lesson. This lesson is quite detailed, I would say. Basically, it focuses quite a lot of different types of switches. Okay, in case you are wondering how come I didn't talk about input devices switches, I talked straight about input sensing devices such as the LDR. So there are switches such as tilt switch, push and hold, all right, momentary switch, press once, that kind of thing. So you really need to read up the basics again. Okay, so this SLS lesson might be pushed to an earlier lesson for you, so that you can actually focus on input, the process of input, basically the input devices, the sensing circuit, to the process components, to the output devices, okay, such as buzzer, speaker, all right, LEDs, and so on. I didn't talk about LEDs, right? So basically, we will also be touching on that. So in a nutshell, this is what we have. So let's delve straight into the appetizer video of something that you would probably will observe and you want to learn more. So after which the respective SLS lessons will be forwarded to you, and any relevant worksheets, all right, in PDF format, or we can, if there's a need to, we also provide you the hard copies during lesson time in semester 2. So let's delve straight into it.